All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Solar Sunday. I'm joined by Ed today, and we're aka FIA Tormentos, and we're here to just kind of talk generally, but segueing from current events. Ed, did you hear anything that happened in this week in the news? Anything big happened this week?
Um, the Epstein files.
The Epstein files. Oh my gosh. Yes, the Epstein files finally dropped. Maybe. You always have to put an asterisk on these things. There's still a lot redacted. The thing we thought would never happen happened, and there's all kinds of interesting commentary about it. I think my favorite revelation that's come out of the Epstein file was that a few people homed in on this. Almost everybody big in like the political world is implicated in some way, shape, or form. Some far worse than others, but there was one name that was not referenced anywhere, and that was Dick Cheney. And so there's all these memes about Dick Cheney he was just doing all this stuff for the love of the game, man. He didn't even have it wasn't even blackmail on him. He was just doing his thing. So that was amusing. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, it was I have not read it in full. I've just gleaned little bits of details, some fairly nasty things about George Bush Sr., some very slightly amusing things about Elon Musk, quite atrocious things about John Podesta, the usual actors. It for anybody who's been, studying some of the conspiracy theories online and entertaining them, it looks like just confirmation by degree. Because again, we still don't have everything. They've still redacted a lot of things, but it seems to be confirmation of a lot of the worst fears that people have had. That like, oh my gosh, they're doing all of the highest people in politics and media seem to be implicated in some very, very dark child trafficking and abuse rings that are all organized around Jeffrey Epstein. And there are some like very interesting, some of the newer things that dropped were there seem to be some ethno-religious motives or feelings in some of those circles as well, which I'll let people who have an interest in that dive through that and look at that yourself. But it's very dark stuff. And one of the biggest things I've heard from people is this very black pilling kind of, yeah, we've seen all this now, and no one's going to be held accountable.
By who?
Right.
By who?
Yeah, well, we don't know that yet, but it, not to sound like a broken record, but it does bring me back to I'm going to skip that actually. I'm not going to go straight to the Republic because that's always the temptation. But like there was a book I read. I forget the author's name, but it was a novelization of the life of Cicero or Cicero, if you're a Latinate purist. I'm going to still call him Cicero. That it was about the Catalan rebellion or attempted coup, led by a populist named Catalina, who attempted to like overthrow the Senate in this. And the book opened with these conspirators in the second Catalan conspiracy gathering together and killing a slave child, a slave boy. And the purpose of killing the slave boy in this novelized account of the Catalan conspiracy was so that all the conspirators would have dirt on each other, that they would all be guilty so that they would hang together and would not defect to the powers that be. This is something we see also with gangs. A lot of gang initiations are go kill a person, not so that, I mean, it's the Spartans, right? Not so that you like prove how hard you are or anything, but so that you automatically put yourself outside of the law and you bind yourself magically to us, to this new group. So ever since I read that book, and then I saw the story. Have you heard of the story of David Cameron, the former prime minister? Okay. So years and years ago, this would have been like 2008 or so somewhere in that territory. David Cameron, the former prime minister of Great Britain, was one of his former colleagues released a book that detailed how David Cameron had, at some weird, like Eyes Wide Shut style party thing, had sex with the decapitated head of a pig. Now, why would anyone do that? It doesn't seem like something you would just do, like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if I, it doesn't seem like it would feel good. It's not something, certainly not something that you would think anyone would do in front of other people. But the purpose of these bizarre sexual rituals seems precisely to be to give other people dirt on you. And so ever since the combination of, reading the Cicero biography and hearing the David Cameron story, from then on, I just assumed that all the people in the highest levels of power were allowed to be there because they were willing to do certain things that would allow other people to have power over them. So when we see a revelation of a mass release of all the names of the people who have been willing to do this, and Jeffrey Epstein, like, he clearly has Mossad ties, but he probably also has MI5 and CIA ties and ties with all kinds of intelligence agencies. He seems to be a service provider. He seems to have been the provider of this service of, you come to my place, I give you the opportunities and the place to get other rich and powerful people to have dirt on you, and then you'll be allowed into these positions of power. Like that was his whole networking thing, as far as I can tell.
And when you look at some of those emails, the way that they're written just seems so unnatural that there's also the possibility that just the emails themselves are that, and there was no real action behind it. There's also the possibility that was Epstein's psyop, and he just did it for some other reason.
It's possible, but the thing is, the claims are so atrocious, that if it was all fake and a psyop, and we seem to have a fair number of victims now who have come forward and be like, yes, these awful people did these things to me, we would expect to hear denials from the people being charged, and the denials are either non-existent or fairly weak. So from history, we would expect these things to be happening. And it's true that to fulfill this function, someone wouldn't even necessarily need to have done something terrible. It would be sufficient for someone to have some way of blackmailing them. If they could just make the public believe that they had done that, that would be, would get the job done. But I mean, the best way to do that is to get them to do it, and we have historical precedent for this kind of thing happening. So like this leads to there's the black pill that some people take, which is like, there's not going to be any accountability. And then there's like the black pill behind the black pill, which is, suppose you held every single person responsible, accountable. Suppose every single one of them found a new home under a lamppost somewhere public. Do you think the logic that governed power for the last 3,000 years would suddenly cease? Or do you think we would still wind up in the same kinds of situations with the same horrific gang initiation? Because these governments are gangs, right? Gang initiation rituals for as the price of entry into the highest positions of power within the next decade or so. It probably would. This has probably always been true. That's not an argument to not hold these people accountable and find an appropriate number of lampposts for everybody. But it does create a much larger question outside of the details of the case, which is, if this is the nature of politics, that it is always this horrific, psychopathic thing, this kind of monster that is governed by the libido dominandi, by this almost sexual lust for power, where these people are, I assume most of these people who do horrific, like underage things are probably not pedophiles by interest. I assume they do these acts for the sake of power, not because they necessarily want that thing. Some of them probably are. There's probably some crossover and sadism and stuff, but it's just, my assumption is it's just that desire for power. So if that is the nature of government and the lust for power that attracts a certain kind of person to government, and if government is necessary, if anarchism is not an option, because anarchism just means being enslaved to someone else's government, then it creates a very interesting question of, how are we as regular citizens who do care about being decent and not allowing this kind of thing, in fact, finding the legitimacy of the law itself to be contingent upon not allowing this sort of thing? How are we to relate to the government? What sort of relationship can we have with these people who are so addicted to power and who crave it so bad that they can and will and do literally anything, including the most heinous things, to achieve it?
Also, though, I mean, has it always been that way for all governments and all people in positions of power? What about people in positions of power that were regular citizens? Like, so is the implication that amongst our, co-workers at the construction site or whatever, there's somebody there that just, is willing to do anything, to be, to climb up the ladder, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
that sort of is a black pill in itself, that like everyone is to be under suspicion. And
right. When I say my default assumption is that all the politicians in high positions of power like this, I don't mean literally all of them. I mean, and maybe not even just Dick Cheney. Maybe there are some other good ones too. Good in the sense of
know how
black
good he
belt.
was.
Yeah, what's the phrase? You only know you only appreciate them once they're gone.
Gone.
I shouldn't say that. But like, I don't mean literally all, but I mean the majority, or much more than we would think, because that is the nature of the thing. There will always be exceptions, and some more. And I'm not even. And you bring up a very good point. Not all governments are equally bad in this regard, right? I'm sure some governments are much better. I say this with a strong view that the Chinese government is probably our most serious enemy in the world today. However, I'll bet the CCP government doesn't have this kind of blackmail operation. It probably has its own blackmail operations. It probably has its own methods for controlling its own parties. But because their methods are more overt, they don't have to do this creepy behind the scenes shadowy stuff. Was one of the points that one of my more preferred left-wing political YouTubers, girl named Shoe on Head, put out a video saying that it was in some ways refreshing to see Trump say, yeah, we're going to Venezuela for the oil. She's like, at least there's no like pretense of like democracy or whatever else. It's like, no, we're doing it for the oil. And that lack of pretense, I think, can be a benefit and can avoid a lot of this really, really dark, shadowy stuff, as brutal as it can be on the surface. Just because our own brutality is hidden doesn't mean there isn't brutality in the maintenance of the power structure. So, yeah, not all governments are equal. But there's a really great video that I've been recommending for like years and years now, which I was very annoyed to see that they changed the title in the last couple of months. It's still there.
The comments were nothing but that.
Yeah, it used to be called Rules for Rulers, and it's by a YouTuber named CGP Grey, and they changed it to be like, you'd be a terrible ruler. I'm like, why did you change this? But did you see that?
I did watch it.
Yeah, it's one of the best introductions, I think, to like Machiavellian power politics. And the basic thesis of this video, which I encourage you to watch if you haven't, for anyone viewing this, is basically that there are certain like logical requirements by power itself. There's like a market of the keys to power, the people who hold access to the positions of power. And if you don't offer benefits to those keys to power, well, you're just not going to be in power very long. So the people who want power so that they can like benefit the public or whatever will always get outcompeted by the people who are corrupt. In other words, corruption is not some exception to the ordinary operation of politics. It's the primary mechanism of politics. There's a sense in which corruption is politics, and that like benevolent benefit for the city as a whole, which is like Plato's idea of the philosopher king, is the cover for what politics is actually doing and about.
So what about on the other side of it? And it seems it's probably an internet phenomenon, because I encounter people in my daily life and nobody's talking about the Epstein files really, but on the internet there's a lot of it, and there seems to be people that they're living and breathing it all day, every day, putting it out there. Like so many things on the internet where people just keep saying the same thing over and over. You need carbs. Carbs are bad. It's like, okay, I've heard this before, and from a certain perspective, like, from my generational perspective, I was born into the Nixon presidency, right? So, talk about, right as an infant, it's all bullshit, sort of.
Right.
And, people go on and live their lives, and politics continues doing what it's doing, but people have pretty good lives, and some people have pretty shitty lives. And a lot of that is probably in their own hands. But the point is, like, just, you open up X or Instagram, and it's just like Epstein. And what is, like, what is that? Like, because it's a choice, right? It's a choice to, make yourself about that publicly in front of millions of other people.
Yeah. Right? Well, there's something psychologically similar to like someone who can't get over an ex. Speaking of ex, in the way that they're like dwelling upon how, and not just dwelling upon, but really like going back in this like autistic repetitive motion kind of thing, over and over on the harm that their own victimization sort of. And on the one hand, I get it, because like everything we're saying about there is clearly something pathological in that kind of useless action. But at the same time, the things we're seeing are genuinely horrible.
So,
And
sure.
it would be perhaps even more pathological if we did not have a strong reaction to the people who are supposed to be our leaders and defending the rule of law, breaking it in every way. And I think there's got to be a way that we can look at both of those things at the same time and be like, okay, we're in a system that creates this kind of behavior, that creates the worst kind of behavior consistently, seemingly by necessity. Why is that? And this is where we turn to sort of Curtis Yarvin, and not anything in particular he said, but his sort of mode of analysis, and ask the extremely unnerving question: is it the leader's need for our approval that is why this kind of moralistic blackmail is necessary at all? Like, is the fact that there is going to be this sort of reaction to to revelations of this sort the reason why it works, and therefore will continue? And that's not to say, oh, therefore we should just not care and then it will go away. No, these kinds of things can continue for a variety of different reasons, and us not caring would probably be far worse than us caring. But it does seem to be just one of these trade-off things with, I hate to say it, but like democracy itself. Like, if you have a public that cares a lot about the moral uprightness of their leaders, then, and we have these, deep state agents and institutions that gatekeep who can and cannot really hold power, then there will always be sort of a market for this kind of thing. And again, like, maybe there would be even more of a market for it if we didn't care about it. So I'm not saying that, but it does ask the question, like, what is the value, purpose, and effect of our emotional reaction to this event, and of our relationship to the state at like a larger level? Like, and this is where I will go full broken record here and say it's such a great time to go back in history whenever there's these big events, and I think the Republic is it's so good. It's just so good because it's about exactly this. It's the opening argument that Thrasymachus makes against Socrates is that the unjust man, basically, who is good at being unjust, gets away with whatever he wants. He is like Epstein, basically. He can do whatever he wants. He can sleep with whoever he wants. He can put in prison who he wants. He can free from prison who he wants. He can do all these things. And after, a lengthy back and forth, and like 8.5 chapters later, we finally work out that the mentality that drives someone towards that kind of power, who is operating from this like animalistic, psychopathic lust for power at any cost, that is symptomatic of an imbalance in themselves, where their own primal instincts are not being checked by their reasoning or their righteous spirit for justice and so forth. And what happens in reality is that they are easily controlled which is what we're seeing with these elites. They get to positions of power, ironically, by becoming powerless. They become pawns of someone else. So their desire for the appearance of power enslaves them. And they are, as Socrates points out, they wind up being these pitiable, terrified, paranoid, and ultimately helpless addicts. Most of these people seem to have drug problems of some sort or another. Might be something fairly benign, like Kamala Harris's wine problem, or it could be something more serious, like what Hunter Biden has been experiencing, and who knows what with the others. But like the relevance of this 2,300-year-old book just never ceases to amaze me. In terms of, and it also goes deep into the question of how should we relate to the city? Should we be public people, or should we be more private people? Or should we kind of have one foot in each world a little bit? So that stories like this, if people take nothing else from the Epstein revelation, especially if they're beginning to feel like there's nothing that can be done, if they're feeling blackpilled, first of all, I hope it's a little bit of hopefully like a little bit of syrup of ipecac for your black pill, to see that people have been running into this kind of problem for thousands of years. It's not unique to our moment of time, even if some of the horrific details and the extent of it maybe is unique to our time. Maybe we're seeing the worst of it because of the global scale. That's entirely possible. But the kind of problem is not new. And it's such a great time to go back and revisit that wonderful book, because it does help to know that we're not dealing with this for the first time, and there are things to be done. There are things to be done, I think.
And so what's the one line? Only those who do not seek power are qualified,
right,
to hold it, right?
Yeah.
So, but as far as like
dragged there against their will,
as far as like reaction and the going back to like the spitting it out constantly, as though that that desperation that people need to hear this because they don't know. We know because we're hearing it from other places, but is it like this probably ties in with the Republic as well? Is it an inherent, not necessarily an inherent human need, but a sort of social and cultural need for there to be justice and truth? So is it triggering that? It's triggering that in people, and they want there to be justice and truth, in the world around them. Also, like clearly they want to be able to look up to other people,
yes,
with admiration as opposed to disgust.
Yeah.
So there's that strong need that there is a hierarchy, and that when the step on the hierarchy above them holds qualities that are superior to their own, so that they can continue to look upward. But also, what else are they doing?
Yeah. Well, justice is an interesting one, because the Republic is, of course, about justice. What is justice?
Yeah, that's the whole.
But it's funny because, halfway through, it is revealed that there is something higher than justice, and that is like the idea of the good. And it's not entirely clear what that is, or if it's even describable. But justice is a good thing in light of that. So I wanted to get a few of these comments in advance. Barbarism says 1 foot in each exist within the world, but not be of the world. It's a very good. I think that's like Jesus, certainly Augustine, who is trying to do Plato without having read Plato. And did a fairly decent job with City of God, although his understanding of Plato was unfortunately limited by his inability to actually read Plato. He had like Plotinus and a few others instead. Advanced Barbarism says the Vikings TV show had a good quote on power too. Probably it's been a while since I've seen that. Gata Sound says good evening, bulls. Advanced Barbarism says power is always dangerous. It attracts the worst and corrupts the best. I never asked for power. Power is only given to those who are prepared to lower themselves to pick it up. That is a great quote. Yes. And it's what we see in Plato is like how, and we also see this in Nietzsche too, because Nietzsche was always frustrated by people who misunderstood his doctrine of power. And he said, I've seen people in like a garden who have more power than these people in like politics. When we say power, there's a question, do we mean the people who can do things or the people who are believed to be powerful? You know, and the appearance of power is not the same as the reality of power. And one of my favorite, I've been reading this book called The Devil's Chessboard Game, or The Devil's Chessboard, by Talbot, about Alan Dulles and the founding of the CIA. And there's Alan Dulles was an absolute genius, and a freaking psychopath, just crazy guy who was like friends with the Nazis while he was working with FDR and like all kinds of crazy stuff. But there's an interesting question there because Curtis Yarvin has said that we've had a variety of different monarchies. We had George Washington, we had Abraham Lincoln, we had Andrew Jackson, and we had FDR. These were these monarchs that fundamentally changed how we ruled. And we are currently living under FDR's necrocracy. That's sort of my word, not his, but basically still under his deep state apparatus and the State Department as he set it up, including the FBI and the CIA and all that. But what Talbot brings up is the possibility that based on how Alan Dulles was running foreign policy basically on his own, there's a real question as to whether it was FDR who set up this necrocracy, or was it Alan Dulles who set up this? And there's the question beyond that is, has intelligence and intelligence agencies always run all governments across all time? The late Scott Adams had a saying that he would bring up where he says, whoever has the best ideas is always in charge. And he didn't mean that's how it should be. It means he meant that's how it is, because the people who are actually in charge will just take the good ideas and implement them. They'll be like, oh yeah, my advisor did this thing that sounds really good, I'll do that. Well, if an advisor says we should do X and the leader does it, who is actually running things, the advisor or the leader? Adams would say it's the advisor. Now, when you think about this idea that like intelligence is always in charge, which would imply that Plato, when he talks about the philosopher king, is not speaking idealistically, but descriptively, that the philosopher king is the reality of how things are ruled. There's a slightly annoying corollary, which is that you don't have to have the best ideas in the world to rule if you just make sure that everyone else is pumped full of absolute crap ideas. Because then you'll have the best ideas just because everyone else is terrible. And that seems to be what these intelligence agencies do largely today. They just lie about everything. So it's a wild world, but if you go down that rabbit hole of thought, there is a possibility of, do we care about who is nominally in charge, or do we care about who is actually in charge? And if we have a bunch of psychopaths who are addicted to power and will do anything for it in power, which seems to be the reality of the human condition, they don't seem terribly concerned about what policies they implement. I think, like, if you look at someone like Hillary Clinton, if it looked politically feasible for her to become the president on a Republican ticket with Ron Paul's policies, how long do you think she would wait to jump on that and win the presidency? Probably not more than 10 minutes, I don't think. Like she would.
And we have examples of people in the last 2 years that did jump from one ship to another.
Oh, sure.
People that we probably try to like a lot. And then you also wonder, like, was that shift about power or was it about policy?
Well, suppose it's only about power, but this is why I framed it as, suppose we have a bunch of soulless psychopaths who are in charge and there's no way to get rid of them. Every decision they make will be about power, right? So if we can persuade them to go for good policies for psychopathic reasons versus bad policies for equally psychopathic reasons, like we can take our nascent population of psychopaths, which we are told is like 4% of the population, and they can either become recidivist violent criminals, or they can become our special forces soldiers and neurosurgeons, which they're also very good at. Without changing their motivation set, it is better to direct them towards the more productive outlets for these instincts rather than the more destructive ones. And so I like to imagine that Scott Adams and maybe Plato are right. And while most of the Republican Party is probably as implicated in all of this horrible Epstein email stuff as the Democratic Party is, I like to think that Scott Adams was essentially running the Republican Party, not because he was like deeply connected to them and everything, but just because he kept putting out really good ideas that would trickle up through, Dr. Drew and Greg Gutfeld, with whom he had a very close relationship. Elon Musk read his stuff. Donald Trump read his stuff. And it would just trickle up that way. And there's a few cases of that straight up happening, him starting to do something and 2 to 3 years later, it comes to pass at like a federal level. And so there are ways that we can influence our government and our society and our culture through something as lowly as a comic strip, if we want to. But if we set our aspirations on fundamentally changing and eliminating a persistent feature of human government that has been true for all time, we might be setting ourselves up for disappointment. And again, this not to excuse, apologize for, or protect any of the people who deserve what we can euphemistically say, describe as the fullest extent of legal prosecution for whatever crimes they've done. Assuming they did them, because to your point, a lot of these things could be fictitious. We don't know.
And then and if it's that widespread, by who is going to, who in the legal system, is the one to hold them accountable if they're in on it too. If they're also eating pizza a couple miles down the road from where I am.
Eating pizza is its own phrasing thing of these emails.
The pizza at that place is really fucking good, I have to say.
The Comet?
Yeah, it's really good pizza.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've been there, like a long time.
I'll have to visit if I'm in DC just to check it out. I'll leave my guns in the car. But it is interesting to think about, and it's I can't encourage people enough to read The Republic on this point. And I think the really useful kind of emotional frame that Socrates brings is it is normal and healthy to see these stories and to be viscerally, even violently angry and be like, not only should these people be gone, but like all the people who should have been dealing with them but did not should also be gone. And what Socrates brings in his psychological profiling and analysis of the tyrant and of these kinds of leaders is an understanding of their enslavement and their lack of control. They really are like addicts. And what Socrates brings is a degree of pity. Like, these people really should be pitied. They are like, honestly, one of the freest of them is probably Hunter Biden. At least his vices are out in the open, so they can't really be held against him. And there's a work by Joseph de Maistre I've been meaning to get to. I might have to translate it myself. Because de Maistre was a Catholic priest who presided over the executions of many criminals, and he would give the last rites and so forth. And he wrote about punishment as something that was necessary and critical, not for society or anything like that, although he also thought that, but for like the soul of the individual being punished. And this can sound like a very Catholic thing, but Socrates seemed to think something very similar, that like these people who are trapped in this cycle and are paranoid and afraid, and that they're addicted to this thing that they can't stop taking more of. Like, how freeing would it be to be caught? Like, obviously all these people in these files, like, obviously I'm sure they're quite upset about it. I'm sure, like, was it Prince Andrew or whatever, the European royalty that's been implicated, George Bush Sr., probably George Bush Jr. too. Like, all these people have been implicated. I'm sure they're very like, oh my gosh, their life's falling apart. But like, I wonder if there's some small part of them that's breathing a sigh of relief, that like, oh, okay, it's in the open now. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And there truly is a kind of like an almost Fight Club freedom in being able to let go of the things that were holding power over you. You know, I don't know. Maybe another subject of maybe I'll actually have to read that.
But how does that apply to the regular citizen that is also being held, you know, where that situation has a power over them as well? You know, it's like, okay, you know, we should be upset, but then there's also the aspect of, I don't even know if this is real. So I'm not sure. Like, me personally, it's like I'm sitting here thinking, well, maybe I'm a psychopath because I feel absolutely nothing.
You're not a psychopath. You're not a psychopath. You are just like the other 300 million or so of us, just really, really jaded and disillusioned with the constant psyops.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like there's concern. This is concerning. And there's also a type of, I feel more about what it is that the American people are having to go through as a result of it. And also the way it's dealt with, the way the media, social media, seeing that people are, just so wrapped up in certain things. And it's like, oh, well, if it is true, yeah, that is really concerning, and what action could be taken. But I'm not experiencing like any kind of overwhelming, sort of fear or emotions or anger about it.
Yeah, there seems to be a kind of fatigue with it all, doesn't there? Like, I think it's less a lack of outrage and more an outrage fatigue. Like, there's so many things to be upset about, and this is why it's important to guard your heart a little bit and not let your sense of outrage be jerked around all over the place, because maybe something genuinely happens that you should be outraged about, rather than like the latest of innumerable atrocities in Southeast Asia or Africa or wherever the fuck, and you don't have the energy for it anymore because you've allowed yourself and your care to be stretched so thin that there's nothing left.
Or is there a place in between? Like, is solar idealism a technology that allows you to experience it and navigate through it in a different way? Is that having an influence, or is it a large portion of my life spent primarily in the sort of eros mindset, that's what I've been looking, that's what I'm looking for in a sense, leading up to where we are now,
I think you're right. I think solar idealism as a mental framework and as a technology to approach these kinds of things with is the right frame. I think we have a strong case that can be made that solar idealism is the best and truest heir to Plato between the traditions of Neoplatonism and Christianity and the other things on the board. I think we've got the most true framework in that lineage.
We accept the spiritual aspect of life while also fully acknowledging human nature. So as not inherently an evil to be transcended. And so you can look at things that are based in human nature. They may be shocking, they may be awful, they may be bad, but they're also perhaps less of a surprise, especially when you're in the high seat looking at everything that has come before us, and you can see that things are not necessarily new.
And that's exactly the description. What you're describing is the spirit of the man who has left the cave and then very crucially come back. And he's come back to the cave, not to free everybody from the cave, because he can't do that, but he can give them a better, truer sense and understanding of what these shadows on the wall are representing. It's like, no, the shadows aren't the real thing. Even the puppets that are casting the shadows aren't the real thing. They're all modeled upon these like patterns or shapes from the outside world. Let me tell you about those. And this understanding of these longer standing patterns, these universal truths of human societies, and these best practices that punch through all the fads and everything, can allow us to look at these moment to moment current events as shadow puppets with a degree of interest, but also a degree of detachment to say, what is this? Rather than, oh my God, did you see the shadow puppets fighting? That one did something so dirty to the other. And we can instead be like, oh, how do we interpret this particular shadow scenario here?
Shadow puppets do so many things.
Yes. We can make all kinds of shadow puppets. Yes. So I think the biggest takeaway I would like to push on people is let the Epstein file release and whatever outrage you have be encouragement to go back and see if things like this have been true in the past and how people approach them. Plot spoiler, they did. And again, it's so astonishing. There's nothing. I'm perpetually shocked by how perfect of a book The Republic is. It is unbelievable. It's extraordinary how perfectly woven that dialogue is.
This is love.
It is.
We're learning about love right now.
Well, that's
sincerely.
That's the symposium, but we'll get to that in another day.
Yeah, that's a whole.
That's another controversial one. I'll probably have to address that when the frickin' the new Christopher Nolan Odyssey film drops, because I don't know if they're gonna do the Achilles and Hector as gay lovers thing. They've got all kinds of other horrific stuff in the Odyssey. Did you see who he's casting as Helen of Troy? It's like Lupita Nyong'o something. Yeah. It's like, okay, or he seems to be doing a like Rings of Power 2.0 with the Greek classics. And
somebody that we know defended the director to a degree, saying that for him it's probably, this is an interesting artistic choice.
Yeah.
Because he's legit. Nolan is legit.
But I think maybe that's the right reaction. Instead of being like, oh my God, I can't believe. Maybe
the story is most important to me. As long as they don't turn Odysseus into, as long as it's not whatever her name is. I block it out of my mind, and then you remind me every so. Wilson.
I have bad news for you.
Well, he likes that translation, but we don't know why. It may be because he thinks she's such a great writer. And
she is. She is, yes.
So we have to give that movie a chance, because
of course,
if he stays true to the story, and it's obviously going to be visually amazing. Obviously,
probably, I mean, Christopher Nolan has knocked it out of the park visually and with his soundtracks too. I'm very curious what he'll do with the soundtrack.
Who is it that's doing it?
I'm not sure.
We don't even know yet. We don't even know.
I'm sure it's going to be great, though.
I am curious who what's their name is going to be playing. It hasn't been revealed yet.
That's going to be Hermes. That's going to be Hermes.
I mean, which in a way, it kind of,
there's an early 1990s a video of the Odyssey
TV miniseries.
Yes, where this absolute twink played Hermes, and it kind of worked. And it was obviously, it was not a political choice, because that was not a politically influenced film. It just seemed to work. So it wouldn't surprise me, and it wouldn't even necessarily be a bad choice. I'm personally I'm open to it. We'll see how he does. I was kind of unimpressed with the Matt Damon choice, to be totally honest.
That's the choice I like the least. And I don't, we don't need to start going on about Anne Hathaway, but I just really, I don't.
Anne Hathaway might be able to pull it off. I don't know. But yeah, we'll see. But I think what I was trying to get to is, like, I've received probably 4 or 5 messages from people who are enraged at Christopher Nolan, and very understandably so, as people should be enraged with the Jeffrey Epstein things. But I think, like, coming at this as a shadow puppet play, and of course Plato was very critical of Homer, for being an imitator, and now we have imitations of imitations, right? We have film adaptations of the stories that Homer was, or that Plato was saying, maybe don't take this so seriously. So these are shadows of shadows. These are imitations of imitations. We can afford to approach these with a degree of emotional detachment, and while they are beloved, and I wish it had been cast differently. I wish he had chosen to be enamored with Fagles instead of Emily Wilson, but like, we don't like, let's see what he does. And then we can make our judgment and be like, oh, I liked this. I think this part was bad. I think this part was good. And then we can be, instead of being reactive and outraged by other people we can bring our own standards that we create and say, this is what it did well to my standards. I didn't like this according to my standard. And in pushing the standard yourself, you move from being emotionally reactive and dragged around by your thumos, or worse, by your appetites, and instead become the force that other people try to please. And you become a cultural leader. And I think that's the way that Scott Adams influenced politics. Is the way that Emily Wilson influenced the classics. And it's the way that we can influence politics or the classics or culture more generally.
And it also, it's the Odyssey is myth that has meaning far beyond the idea of history. And a lot of the people that are really angry are acting like you've taken my personal history, especially the statue people.
Yes.
You're taking, look what you've done to my history. No, this is the heritage of mankind, really. So it's a touchy thing. But when it comes to myth, it really is what is the lesson. And that's the important thing for me to see. And also in the interesting choice of perhaps casting that actress, there are people that may not even necessarily by their own doing or mindset have been denied access because of administrators in places, in certain universities, that have stopped, because, little Becky cried when she read the Iliad and it frightened her and made her feel unsafe, or that kind of thing. So there are people that actually have, like, in the places where they may have encountered the Odyssey, it's been removed because of ridiculous things. And it may draw them in, and it may possibly, it could, because there's a lot of people reading these things right now compared to 10, 15 years ago. I'm seeing people, I'm running into,
especially Gen Z. Gen Z is freaking killing it.
And so it's an opportunity, and it's, I'm not even trying to sound like woke or anything, but it's like perhaps that actress will make a whole bunch of people that didn't even know about the Odyssey read it and understand something
out of reactionary anger.
I mean, if you get what I'm saying, and it's like when something like that is done for the reasons that we know are really awful, that's one thing, but it just, if it's good, it's good. And if it's only a little good, it's only a little good. We still have the actual text of the Odyssey.
Yes,
to rely on and to promote and to talk about, because Hollywood is not the fucking center of the world, and neither is the art that they create. They'd like to think that, but there's a lot more going on, like fire rituals in the Arizona desert coming up in March. Our next event is going to be probably one of the biggest. There's a whole bunch of new guys coming that I haven't got to meet in person yet. I'm really happy about that.
I'm jealous.
We've got Georgia, we've got the event in June coming up. So there's opportunity for there's opportunity for people to read the Odyssey when they join the Order of Fire and have their father challenge.
Yes. Fun fact. I have a mini course on, is it the Odyssey? or is it the Iliad and the Odyssey? I think it's just the Odyssey within our group. So you can check that out if you join.
And there's also an overview from the former version of this very live show.
Oh yes, that's true, Jack. We did a walkthrough of that. It was like a 4-part video. I'll have to go back and find that.
So, really good.
That seems like a good spot to finish up talking about outrage over Epstein files and classics. Which one's more serious? You be the judge. No, they are
more angry about the Odyssey than the Epstein files, but maybe I need to ask myself some questions.
I will not say that to anybody I meet who happens to have been to Epstein Island and witnessed things personally. But in other company, I will share your opinion.
I don't know anyone that's been a victim of Epstein Island, so
yeah. There's pretty terrible stuff, but that's not all of us. And and again, like the value of this detachment is in is in adopting the frame of mind that allows you to change the systems that create these horrific things too. So, like, as counterintuitive as it can be to change things by caring a little bit less, I think there is power in that. And it's not out of like disinterest or ambivalence, but out of a genuine care for the good, that we like not be distracted by our like moment to moment emotions and so forth. But we're beginning to drag on. That seems a good spot to stop. So thank you everyone for tuning in who tuned in. Should be live on Spotify in the next day or so. And thanks so much for listening, everybody. Take care and stay solar.
Stay solar.
Thank you for watching or listening to the Journal of Solar Culture. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and leave us a comment. The first volume of our journal is available in paperback and now, finally, on Kindle. Pick it up in our store or on Amazon.